It's a beautiful day here. I hope it is where you are too. And those of you affected by the floods, I hope your recovery is quick. It's been hard to see so much destruction. But we do have a lot to talk about today, and so we're going to get going. The first thing to share is, do you want to give an update on the Kamala fundraiser?
So those of you who have been involved in the Kamala fundraiser, we've had over 18,000 downloads of that pattern. And if you're in the Facebook group of Modern Quilt Studio Patterns and Fabrics, you've seen the tremendous things people have done adapting the quilt and making it part of kind of a celebration of this candidacy.
And then there's also donations going from all of the merchandise as well.
Yes.
So
it's been very successful, and I think mostly it's great to see the support you all have.
But in general, we've raised about $200,000, which is
significant,
kind of
a little
incredible.
more than we would have been able to do on our own.
A lot more, several decimal points. So okay, your hive quilt is spectacular. I just saw it this morning.
So those of you who are on the fence about the mini quilt along, the hive mini quilt along, take a look at what Kay uploaded today and what many actually have done either in stages or completed. The work that you're doing with the richness of pattern and color is like, it's what we wanted to see.
Absolutely.
It's really exciting.
So we've got kind of a weird situation we need to tell you about that is atypical, but it's helpful. It will be helpful for you to know. So typically we don't talk to you, or we don't share the background of when fabric lines are coming and when next quilt alongs are. We don't share that before you're able to enroll, because a lot of people find it frustrating. However, we do need to share with you that, and you may have missed it because there's so much going on in the world right now, but a dock workers strike started today that affects the docks from Maine all the way to Texas.
Basically, all the Atlantic ports and the Gulf Coast ports in the U.S.
But it will also create chaos for the West Coast ports as well. This is a little bit of tedium, but I think you will want to know this information. So hang with us for a minute. We have a new fabric line that watercolors, transparency watercolors, which we were very excited about, and that was supposed to be arriving in the Benetech studios in mid-October.
And any day now was when we expected to have it.
So those fabrics are on the water now, as they say, which means that they have left Korea where they're printed, and they were working their way toward the warehouses on the East Coast. The dock workers strike, the last one was in 1977, and it lasted 44 days. And the typical logistics are, for every week that the strike goes on, the goods will be delayed by 4 to 6 weeks. So for every week, a month, basically. So
because there's the ships and the containers are just backing up, and there's only so much capacity to
And
unload.
I will say, I really feel for the banana people, because there's entire the U.S. does not produce its own bananas, and so all of the bananas that are coming from the Philippines, that's going to be rough. So buy your bananas right now, today, while you can. But in terms of our fabric, this was the timeline we had planned. We had planned for the fabric to get into the warehouse in mid-October, and on November 1st, we were going to announce our new quilt along and share the and have available on our website the watercolors, the transparency watercolors fabrics that would be used for the January quilt along.
But
however, we at this point it's all up in the air.
Anyone's guess. It's
yeah.
Basically every day that the strike goes on is about 6 days of delay generally. So,
not six.
1 day
days.
is 6 days
okay.
roughly.
Yeah.
So even a 1 week strike can set everything back.
That would set everything back a month to 6 weeks for us.
So, and you never know when there's a backlog where your ship or your container is in the grand scheme of things. So there's going to be a lot of wait and see.
Yeah. So later in the month, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that later, is the virtual fabric show that Benotex hosts, and they'll be showing the fabrics. However, we kind of weren't sure how to handle this with you. My feeling is it might be easier to tell you it's on the way. So you kind of don't wonder why we haven't announced anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep an eye on the strike. It may not work to start January 1st this year.
Honestly, it's kind of unlikely, I think.
Well, I don't know, because we had talked about it.
We don't know yet.
Announcing November 1st, but it's also complicated by the fact that it's right near Christmas. So, So we've got something in the works. It's going to involve transparency watercolors, and we want to wait.
It's really cool.
It's really cool. And so just kind of, and we'll explain this in our newsletter too. So, but just bear with us, and also realize, and I'm not trying to create any panic buying right now, but realize this is going to affect the entire quilting industry.
Well, it's going to affect the entire country and way beyond the quilt.
Well, obviously, I'm just saying.
But the whole industry will be backed up, and a lot of suppliers have had this potential strike on their radar for a long time. So there are many people who ordered months ahead to kind of keep their supply chains moving forward. But there's only so much capacity. So this will have an absolute effect on everything from what you see in grocery stores to probably repairs for your car, everything.
Right. And so you're going to, this is why there's already Christmas trees at Costco and that kind of thing.
So it hasn't been covered a lot by the news yet, as Week said, because there's so much going on.
There's so many other things going on
but
in the world.
It will probably be very big news by the end of the week. So
if there are fabrics you need for holiday projects,
stock up.
I really encourage you to buy early. Because when things run out, sort of depending on the inventory, it may take a lot longer to get it than it normally would. So we're going to roll with it, and we're going to keep you posted.
We always improvise. We figure out. We have no shortage of ideas.
Yeah, it's just, never a dull moment. So one of the things, though, shifting gears that I posted, some of you may have seen, I posted a week ago, asking about UFOs and how to help you with that and support you with that. And, somebody missed the beginning. The strike happened at midnight last night. And it's the International Longshore.
It's the Dockworkers
Association, versus the Alliance of Shippers who manage the docks. So there's the dock workers, and the owners of the dock have not been able to make progress with their contracts. So the dock workers have gone on strike, which means that everything in every port trying to come into the United States.
On the Atlantic and the Gulf Coast.
But it will also create havoc on the West Coast because there will be some ships that will be diverted. And so they are on strike. And for every week that they're on strike, it will take an additional week to...
46. Sorry.
It will take an additional, for every week they're on strike, it will take 4 to 6 weeks for goods to make their way back in because it's going to get so chaotic. And that's going to affect our fabric lines and our quilt-alongs in the next few months. So we're just going to keep you posted, and we're going to just have to adapt as the situation unfolds. You know, the 44 days was really sobering, the last one in 1977, because I did the math for that, and that would be like, oh, that would be 6 months.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
We wouldn't get our fabric for 6 months.
We saw that this might be coming, and Weeks had talked to you all about the kind of UFOs you have, and we thought this is kind of a nice, not a nice confluence, but if we can't necessarily move forward on new projects, it is a good time to visit some things you have going on already.
Well, we can move forward with new projects, but
they have to
not events.
Different. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so back to the UFOs and all of that. And so one of the things that we thought about talking, giving you some assistance with, is the question we always get about whether a pattern is easy or hard. And because that seems to be, for some people, where they get overwhelmed. And if you are looking at a pattern, there are lots of different ways to determine whether it's easy or hard. But sometimes you need to kind of filter what you see, because some things that look hard aren't hard because there's strip sets or something like that. There's shortcuts for it. And then there are other things that look easy but
are
challenging because of the sheer number of pieces. So, for example, so some of the things to look for when you're trying to determine whether something is appropriate for the time you have and the skills you have are how many pieces, if there are specific techniques that, and it, for example, you know, if there's 6 curved pieces, that's probably not a big deal. But if there are 35 curved pieces, it is going to be a little bit more. It's good because you're going to have to pin more carefully and that kind of thing. And I know, like, our House of Mirrors quilt looks hard, but it's not because it's strips very fast. So it sort of just depends on how the pattern is written.
And I also want to jump in to say that there are a lot of pattern writers and magazines that will have a scale, kind of beginner, intermediate, expert. And I'm going to say that 9 times out of 10, that refers mostly to the construction of the quilt. And a lot of quilts that we design may be kind of in the middle or easy sewing, but sometimes it's the picking of the palette and the preparation and the thinking that's actually what's hard.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking again, many of you are working on the Hive quilt, which has only 2 blocks. You're making the same block over and over, and that's straight line sewing. But you put a lot of time up front into developing the palette, and there's a lot of time.
Color work takes time.
Color work takes time, and the layout is another thing. So there's some quilts that make 44 of this block, 55 of this block. They're all identical, and it becomes very much basically an assembly line. You're repeating the same action, the same thought. With some quilts like Hive, you actually are thinking about every single color combination you put together. And so it might not be as appropriate a quilt. It might feel harder if you're doing it at the end of a very long work day.
And the other thing I was going to try to see if this is helpful, is to sort things, kind of score 3 different categories for the pattern. How many pieces does it have? Because you can have a quilt that's easy to sew, but there are a lot of pieces to cut, and that takes a lot of time. Or it's a technique that's time consuming. Or there's color work that takes a while to edit. And I know, especially with our transparency quilts, that for those of you who wanted to work from your own stash or buy from your local, use fabrics that weren't ours, there was a lot of time involved in curating those palettes and getting your color codes and all of that done. So, what I was going to suggest you do is not think as much in terms of, is it easy or is it hard, but answer some questions and reframe it in your mind to, given the time I have and my skill set and energy levels, is this quilt going to be, where does it fit in there? Because there are easy quilts that have 300 pieces that, take a long time. And sure, it's easy in terms of technique, but it's not easy if you're trying to finish it in a certain time frame or you've got limited energy.
Mm-hmm. And I think we see the quilts that you all post, and there's usually a huge range. A lot of people like to kind of alternate between the fast and easy quilt that you have a sense of accomplishment in finishing, and something that is more detail oriented. And I think that's, as Week said, it's a balance of skill set and time. The other thing that comes into play, the more pieces there are, or the smaller the pieces there are, the more fabric it's going to require, simply because
it may not be efficient. Yeah,
it may not be as efficient, and there's a greater proportion of each piece that's actually in the seam allowance. So quilts that have small pieces are also usually more costly. They're costly, they use more of your time, but more of the fabric ends up on the back of the quilt.
Yeah, that's true.
And you can have 2 napping quilts that are 4 feet by 6 feet. One might have 60 pieces, one might have 600. And it could be 2.5 times as much fabric needed for the exact same finished size.
You might need like 4 yards or 5 yards for one and 8 yards for another, because there's just so much loss in the seam allowance. And so Patricia's saying she's interested in twin and napping sizes for community service. And this is a great plug for our pattern finder on the Modern Quilt Studio site, where you can look at everything. I would say most of our quilts are that napping size that is big enough for a 6 foot tall person to have their shoulders covered and their body covered. It's usually about 52 by 78-ish, but it varies based on the pattern, because sometimes the layout.
Yeah, it works with the proportions of the blocks. And I think also in our little Fat Quarter Love publications, there are a lot of kind of fast and easy quilts that use some larger pieces. And the other thing, I think many of you have seen our Fat Quarter Love booklets, which are the size of a fat quarter. The very nature of the tiny booklet means that the instructions have to be simple, that there aren't funky pieces, that there aren't curves. So generally, I'd say 99% of what's going to be in those is technically easy.
Yeah. So so then we were thinking about other ways, that's if you're moving forward, looking at patterns, that's a helpful way to be able to evaluate whether or not, and also, I have to say, it's also how the pattern's written. I think, Bill, the fact that we have so many illustrations in our patterns, courtesy of Bill's incredible graphic design skills, I think makes our patterns easier than many. I find it hard to read paragraphs of text and visualize, but anyway, so we decided to figure out if there was something else we could do to help you jumpstart some of those UFOs, because it feels really good to, at least before the end of the year, get a couple of them, like either decide to finish them or donate them to a guild or somebody, to a long armor for practice or whatever. You don't have to finish everything. There's a whole, I'll release you from that.
Yeah. and I think, but going to this, there's often an end of the year rush to clear the decks. We were looking at the calendar and thought, let's talk about this in October, because by the time November and December comes around, by the time they come around, there's kind of a panic and there's almost too much to do to feel good. So October seemed like a really good kind of finish up month.
Exactly. So we decided to do, like, we read every one of your comments, and a lot of you were getting hung up on different parts. There were some people who had the pattern, had the fabric, but they were afraid to get started. Then there were people who were worried about a technique. They were worried that they wouldn't be able to do it. Then there were people who felt overwhelmed by the quilting, and then people who felt overwhelmed by the binding. So what we decided to do was put together a PDF for you to help you break down some of your UFO tasks. So what we did was we've organized it so you can look at a variety of projects you have and assess what needs to be done on them. Because for example, if you need a yard of fabric on this one and some thread for this one and some template plastic for this one, being able to see that all together might be really helpful for you to just get all of the supplies you need.
Right. And you may, if you only have one project you're working on, you just need the one column. But we thought having 3 projects, I think the reality is most of us have multiple unfinished projects. You can really see side by side.
And so what you're going to do is what we're trying to encourage you to do is to think a little bit differently. Rather than think you have to sit down and finish the whole thing, I promise you will feel better if you can make just incremental progress over time. So, for example, we've got these little dash lines there, and for the different steps of making the quilt. And, if you work on it for 30 minutes, you just put a little X in the dash to just track that you're making progress on it, because it'll feel a lot better to just break down the task than to just think of, oh, they're UFOs or whatever.
It's something that we commonly do here at the studio. Earlier, someone in the comments had asked about our next publication of Modern Quilts Illustrated number 16. It's so close, and we actually have kind of a breakdown of what tasks still need to be done, and it's really close. We just keep coming up with new ideas that we want to fit in.
Well, no, what happened with that is we made all of the quilts, and then I told Bill that I thought a couple of them weren't good enough, and I felt like we needed to design something better, and not be in a hurry to get it out, but really focus on getting the best possible publication out. And I think you were thinking the same thing. Right?
We both felt the same way.
Yeah.
And that we like to push ourselves and try to come up with new forms. And there are a lot of quilts in this world. We like to create things that get people to think a little differently, to push their own boundaries. And so we have a couple new ideas that we kind of fit into that
are really different.
That I'm really happy with.
And the thing is, the quilts that we had designed and we had photographed and we'd written the patterns for it and everything, they were absolutely fine quilts. But we just felt like, there are only so many quilts you get to make. And we really felt like we owed it to you to kind of really, raise the bar for ourselves. So that's why it's still delayed.
So that idea of kind of the finish up sheet, it's not just for quilts for us, it's for us as well. And
this is how we work. We don't do the 30-minute increments of progress, but we do think in terms of lots of quilts at once, because we're typically working on 4 or 5 quilts at one time.
And by having things mapped out, there's some days where you feel like I can work on a binding while I watch a movie, or I have 3 hours uninterrupted where I really can get all my fabrics out and do a lot of the cutting. So this PDF, we've put a link to it in the comments so you can download it. For those of you who are watching this later on YouTube, if you look down below in the description, we'll have a link to download this directly. It's just a free worksheet that prints out on one piece of paper. If you have lots of UFOs, you print out a few.
So is this something that will be helpful to you? Because this is interesting. It's helpful for us to know whether this will be something that you'll be able to use to help you organize your UFOs, or is it more that you've just kind of moved on and you don't want to finish it? Because there's definitely times that's been the case for us. So let us know in the comments section if you think having this little PDF will help you get organized with that.
And as we said also, don't ever hesitate if you've outgrown a project you're in the middle of, if it's just a burden for whatever reason, you can just pass it on.
Yeah, and the thing is that
you don't have to finish everything.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there are certain quilts and certain projects that are about, they were perfect for the time, but they're no longer, you've outgrown them, or you don't have, they're no longer challenging to you or interesting to you. And I don't think of that being a problem. I feel like that, it helped you for a season. And if you're done with it now, then pass it on to somebody else, because there are lots of people who, especially long armors, who are new long armors, who just need something, to practice their long arming skills on, or there's service project for guilds where they would love to have a completed top or even a half completed top that somebody else can finish. So,
and that's, I think when Debbie, you say any kind of organize my mind system can be helpful, I feel the same way. When we were talking about the structure of this, it's not that there's some perfect structure.
Yeah.
It's just that trying something is often better than trying nothing. And in the earlier comments, sometimes you just need to learn a new skill. Mm-hmm. Sometimes just writing that down to identify it
absolutely.
is what you need. And
but I think this is like, this is kind of a brain dump of everything that you need to do for just a specific number of projects. You don't have to, if you've got 15 UFOs or whatever, you don't have to do all 15, but it would feel good to probably do 3, before the end of the year.
And I think, that comment, Shirley, about too many things is overwhelming. And I like having 3. One of the nice things when you see them side by side, you can prioritize them according to what your goal is, what your time is, what your budget is. And by breaking down the individual steps, I think it's easier to make progress. Weeks and I, even though we're visual artists, we work a lot going back and forth between the verbal and the visual, mm-hmm. and find that writing things down is like, it always helps, like 100% of the time. So my kind of weekly planning is, I use a bullet journal, and I use it as a brain dump, and I love it for that, because if I don't write it down, then I'm carrying it around in my head. And for me, the act of writing it down helps me organize my thoughts in a way that it doesn't when it's typed in, and I'm looking at a screen. And I think that's the other thing I like about having a checklist like this is you write it out by hand, you can pin it up on a bulletin board. My organization system is I'm a clipboard guy. I have each project on a separate clipboard, and I have all these hooks on a bulletin board, and I hook them So if I'm working on the latest issue of our magazine, I grab the clipboard that has all of the information for that. When I'm working on a commission or
fabric line
working
or
on
whatever.
a quilt along, we have a quilt alongs, we need big thick binders because they're
True.
insanely complicated.
There's no clipboard's big enough for that.
But each project has its own clipboard. And, you know, when we finished this, I thought, I'm actually going to use this myself.
Yeah. And, you know, Elizabeth, that getting overwhelmed, this is most of those comments, if you look back at that post, most of those comments were talking about getting overwhelmed. And so when, you know, we were talking about this idea, I said, the way to not be overwhelmed is to break down the tasks and deciding that just like thinking through, this isn't about finishing everything. This is about making progress. And so that's why, you know, we decided to do the little, the tick marks where you can at least see that you're making progress, even if it's not like the cutting isn't done or the piecing isn't done or the quilting isn't done. It's just helpful to see, look, I'm making progress on it and I can do it in 30-minute increments. I don't need, you know, a retreat for 3 days or a weekend or whatever to make progress. You can just like make small, you know, moving the nut forward.
And the other thing is, the first thing is to name your project, but the second simply says goal. And we put that there because for some of you, just having to fill in that blank may make you think, maybe I don't have a goal. Maybe I'm not really that interested in this project.
Right.
Or other times it'll be...
Well, the goal would be like to finish the piecing or to finish the... Like, this is what you're going to try to do this month.
But it also might be that the goal is that baby shower on November 14th.
Right.
The goal might be...
Or October 14th.
The goal might also be specifically mastering a technique. The goal might be just trying a technique for the first time and not even mastering it, but just getting past any anxiety to do it. So I think having that goal written down, it doesn't have to be finishing. It can be like an interim goal. Like, what are you really after in doing this quilt? Is it just that you love the fabrics and you just want to spend time with them? I've actually known quilters who talk about not finishing a project because they enjoy it so much that they just want to keep going, which is a different challenge.
And Debbie, you really hit the nail on the head here, because the idea is that if you just decide that you're going to work on 3 projects this month, you don't have to go through all of them. This is just about like, just focus on the 3 that you think you either want to do the most, or you think that you're the closest to finishing, or the ones that, you know, you would feel a sense of relief or pride in finishing. So this isn't like, you know, when our daughter was little, we had this family cleaning time on Sunday afternoons for an hour. And it wasn't like we're going to spend the entire day cleaning the house. It was, we're going to spend an hour cleaning the house, and there's a timer, and then there's music, and then there's snacks. There's a whole thing. And because it doesn't seem as overwhelming, if you say, oh, we're going to clean the house, then it feels like the whole day is gone. Whereas if you say we're going to spend an hour cleaning the house and everybody's going to do their part, then it's a lot easier to feel like you're going to actually do it.
And I'm actually going to have a quick call out. If you want, you can post a photo of this filled out. It's like account. And I'm not after shame and accountability here, but just like you can share in the group what you're working on. And I think you all know the group is full of cheerleaders here. People are really, we want each other to be successful, and seeing what that goal is, I think it will spur other people to make advances as well. And I think, you know, we have certain goals. You know, at the beginning of the hour, we were talking about the dock workers strike. You know, we deal with deadlines. So many of our goals are deadline driven, But there are others like you. We have UFOs. We have an amazing quilt that we pieced for our bed, and it really is more of a winter quilt.
Yeah.
So it's been in the making for I don't know how many years.
It's like 4 years.
4 years?
Yeah.
Well, winter's around the corner, so maybe we're going to get that finished up for
Yeah. So the thing that I think, you need to break down in your head is that finishing things you don't need to wait to get started on that. You just need to kind of do the brain dump of what needs to be done, and then just kind of be making small amounts of progress with. Some of you in the Patterns and Fabrics group on this particular post about UFOs suggested that we do a UFO club, and the thing that's tricky about that for us, and this is why we kind of came up with this instead, is that often when we have done in-person events like this, we get a situation where somebody brings us a pattern that somebody else has written, or and the problem is the pattern, and and it puts us in a kind of awkward situation trying to give advice on a pattern that we think wasn't written clearly,
or gave some bad advice,
or that there were shortcuts that they should.
We try to limit our advice to things that we've created because we're responsible for those.
Yeah. So so what we're thinking is that this idea, you can use the group as a UFO support group for sure, and in terms of, like, we're going to ask you not to be posting, this is our business's page, and so we don't want to be like, oh, here's my, my tulip pink quilt, and we don't want to be supporting other businesses.
No, we want you to finish those quilts. We want you to finish up those quilts, but we're going to kind of keep.
But you can post this, and you can share your progress, and we'll cheer you on that.
That's
way.
Well said.
And Elizabeth says she's a major list maker. I'm the queen of lists also. And I think that the thing about lists is it helps you organize your thoughts. And it for me, it removes a lot of stress to be able to have achievable goals. That's always big. Big goals can get overwhelming, but achievable little, break it down. That's it. Debbie says she wants to see the bed quilt now.
And you will see it at
some point. At some point.
And yes, yeah.
But
it's pieced, but it's not quilted.
Yeah.
I think it's pieced.
It is pieced. It's totally pieced.
It's totally pieced. We just need to get batting.
So so share your, if you want, share your progress on the Patterns and Fabrics page, and I think it would be great to encourage others to also download this. Like I said, there's no cost for this or anything.
It's just a little...
But it's just a way to help you...
End of the year help.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of finish strong, like finish the year end. People always focus on New Year's resolutions, and I actually like the idea. I've always had this is... Having lived in Asia, there's a big clean that happens before the end of the year, where everybody cleans everything to get last year's dirt out and last year's bad spirits out. And I'm all about that. And I've been doing that for 20, 30 years now.
It's just kind of part of our household.
But this is also part of it, is kind of like finishing up things that are weighing on you, or that are taking energy, or that you don't feel good about. Like, let's get that out of here. Let's get that out of here before the new year comes. Because even if the dockworkers strike delays things, we've got some fun coming for you.
We do.
And you really are going to want to be ready.
It's going to happen.
So, yeah.
Sounds good. So we've got one more thing to cover.
So, as we mentioned earlier, the virtual fabric show sponsored by Benartex is October 15th and 16th. We'll be sharing, because they're working so far in advance right now, we're going to be sharing 2 lines in that.
So we'll be talking about the ideas, the inspiration,
Right.
showing you some of the illustrations of the patterns that are going to be in those 2 lines.
In the sample quilts that we'll be making with them. One is the transparency watercolors line, the ill-fated, our fabric lines. We've had some rough
shipping.
work.
Shipping has been tough in the last couple of years.
But we will be on October 15th, and we're gonna tell you Central Times, which is 2:45 to 4:15 in the second session on October 15th.
And we'll be posting those details later.
Well, and you'll see it if you register on Benartex's site. There's a 1 to 2:30 session that comes before ours, but we'll be in the second session on October 15th. The event also runs on October 16th, so you can look on Benartex's site to see which designers and which projects you're interested in.
But keep in
And
mind
you can
that
register for that.
Benartex is always doing these virtual fabric shows at least half a year in advance. So if you fall in love
More
with the
like
fabric,
9 months in advance.
you unfortunately can't get the fabric right away, but it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that there is the watercolors line for those of you who loved transparency. We think you're going to love this line, which is kind of in the structure of the original transparency line, but it's kind of lighter and airier. I don't think of them as pastels because they're still strong
gentle.
colors. Yeah, but you can use them in conjunction with the original transparency fabrics as well. And they're so versatile. And then we're also going to be sharing our 2025 LTD line, the first LTD line.
As in limited.
Yeah, do you want to explain that?
We're going to do a limited edition, a kind of a unique line where we explore a different idea once a year for who knows how many years. So the first is for 2025, it will be released. And it's going to be a collection of prints plus one kind of large scale repeat that is going to be almost like a bonus print. I mean,
So the LTD, I'm thinking about it differently, which is that it's a palette that we are excited about that they're not tone-on-tone prints. They're more interesting than tone-on-tone prints, but they're more flexible than multicolored prints. And so there are the main group of fabrics is kind of a palette that is sort of like a palette forecasting. They're the colors that we think are going to be really useful and popular and fresh for 2025. But they have motifs that are larger. They're on their own, they could be interesting fabrics.
And they work well with others.
But then there's a big, and they're going to be screen printed, but then we're also going to have one large scale digital print that can work with it or can stand on its own.
And again, it's fortunately called 2025, so we have a full year with the dock workers strike.
Yeah.
We don't really know when the release date will be, but it will be in 2025.
Yeah, and then I will say, just kind of as a spoiler alert, for those of you, many of you who have emailed and commented on social media that you would like to have a, hold on.
Oh, where's she going?
Hold on.
Oh, okay.
That you love our anniversary packaging, 25th anniversary packaging. This is the print that we will have.
The large scale.
Large scale print. So those of you who've asked for this as a fabric,
it
will
will
be getting it. So
It
that will be that.
But again, we don't know when it'll be out in 2025 alongside that print, but alongside that
Yeah.
fabric line.
Yeah.
But we just don't know with the dock workers strike when it's going to happen.
It was supposed to come out in May of next year in time for a summer event, but
who knows? All bets are off.
all bets are off now. So we're just gonna wait and see what happens. And but anyway, yes, make sure you sign up for those the virtual fabric show, and also our newsletter because we'll make announcements there too, and that's on our website. You can see in the upper right hand corner of the navigation bar. There's a sign up for the newsletter area.
So that's basically.
And you want to talk about 16 before we have to go?
Modern Quilts Illustrated number 16, as Week said, we keep reinventing the wheel. We look at some projects we've done and we have a new idea that we like better. So we set one to rest and redevelop it. I think at this point, everything is set and
by the end of the year, we hope.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially
if the dock workers strike goes on and on.
Way before the end of the year. Fingers crossed. But it's
that's our
it's
UFO.
Close. Yes.
Right.
So it's right there. So anyway, lots of uncertainty. The one thing that's certain is we're sewing and having fun.
Yes.
And we will adapt.
Right.
And make sure that we bring you some great projects.
Yes.
Regardless of what happens with our best laid plans.
But we'll hope that you can use this time, especially in October before the holidays, to feel good about just knocking out a couple of your UFOs, or deciding that you don't want to finish them, and that that the chapter
goodbye.
Is over for that particular project, and
you've learned what you've wanted to learn.
and you find a new home for it, because
that's good.
If you're holding on to it and it's a guilt trip, you don't need that in your life. So if it's not fun to finish, don't finish it.
Exactly.
And we've certainly done that numerous times.
Okay.
So anything else we can help you with before we say goodbye? So Pam's comment about the look ahead gives you motivation to maybe finish up some of what you're working on now.
That's a good point.
That's exactly what we were thinking. Before we start a new project, we want to make sure that you are not feeling overwhelmed by any projects that you haven't finished, because that kind of it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make you feel good about quilting.
So again, thanks for bearing with us when Facebook froze. We'll edit that and make sense of it as we repost it on YouTube. So we'll get that up later today.
So good luck
and
for
thank you.
All of you dealing with the aftermath of the floods, and we hope you will be back to normal as soon as possible.
Stay safe and take care, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.